Okay, I think we can probably get started, Chris. So I just want to say welcome to everybody who's joining us. It is our bi-weekly SBA PPP2 round of loans and frequently asked questions that Chris is going to hopefully, not hopefully, but will educate us on. So I'm going to hand this over to Chris and let him get going with it.
Okay, yes. Hi, everybody, and thanks for attending today. There are not so many new things, so we're mostly going to go through some frequently asked questions that there are a couple of new variations on it. And then, of course, we will field the questions also that Claire will manage through her management things here. First, I did want to share a couple of statistics that the SBA has shared with us, and that is that the second draw, which had a $285 billion funding, as of, I guess, this morning, had a $126 billion tap on. 5,100 lenders has lent 126 billion of those funds. So that 126, 280, so there is some 160 billion still to go on that. And this time around, we think that maybe it's not going to tap everything again. This time around, I think mostly because of that, it's more small businesses this time. 70% of them are for less than $50,000. And I think a lot of the certification requirements and the 25% decrease in revenue requirement has kicked out a lot of the bigger companies, I think. New Jersey has had its share of the loans, 3.8 billion, 42,000 loans. So I think we are getting in New Jersey our share of the loans here. So with those statistics, we are going to jump into some frequently asked questions. I was hoping, there we go. This is a question that I've been asked quite a few times from some SCORE people and from just acquaintances and those kind of things, saying that, I got my PPP1 directly through SBA, or I got a servicing notice from SBA. How do I go about, I haven't been able to figure out how I go about filing my forgiveness. And that question, first time I ran across it, didn't make sense to me. Wait a minute, why would SBA service a PPP1 loan? Since they didn't issue them, they are guaranteeing them, and a lender is actually issuing them. So as looked into it, no, it wasn't what they thought it was, the people asking the question, because you don't. If that went through SBA, more than likely it was not a PPP, but actually an EIDL, where the borrower mistakenly thought that it was a PPP. If that gets serviced through SBA and you did the loan directly to the SBA, it's probably not the PPP, because that was done through lenders with a guarantee by the SBA. Now, in some of those cases, they have been able to react, and it was appropriate to react by actually going back to PPP1, applying for PPP1, and obtain those funds and using them, and then be able to pay off the EIDL loan sooner. And then eventually that PPP will actually get forgiven. So in the end, it will be a forgiven loan. But check into that. If it looks weird, you're getting weird notices that doesn't sit right with you, check into that so that you actually have a PPP and not an EIDL. Do I have to apply to forgiveness to get a PPP loan. No, you don't. You don't have to apply for forgiveness to get PPP loan. Some lenders are pushing that, and that if you have PPP1 with them, you're looking for PPP2, they want you to apply to forgiveness first. And it appears to be that the lenders can do that. They can push that. It is in the hands of the lenders. They don't have to make loans if they don't want to. What are the requirements is that you are going to spend the first PPP as required before you get the PPP2 funding. So is PPP2 running out of money? No, those statistics that I just told you about, that we have only tapped into 126 out of 285 billion in the second round. It doesn't look likely that you will run out. However, what we hear is that many people who haven't gotten their forgiveness yet that have applied have kind of gotten scared and held off with a PPP2. And I don't think that that's any reason to do that. If you qualify, it will be forgiven. Should not be a problem. It should be the same thing with a second PPP. So that leads into the other question, that what about my forgiveness? I applied 2-3 weeks ago, and I really don't hear anything. That seems to be right now par for the course. In the beginning, some of the lenders kind of held off and didn't forward it. They were waiting for more guidance, and then they were waiting for the easy form to come out, which I think it did, and then they were waiting for some more guidance. So it has been discombobulated. It is going to happen. I don't think there is any doubt. No, let me rephrase that. There is no doubt that forgiveness is going to happen. If you qualify for the forgiveness, it will be forgiven. Absolutely.
And I can say as well, Chris, that I know with my lender, they said that they had to almost put a halt on doing the forgivenesses and accepting the applications to get through the second round of the PPP applications.
Yes.
And now that they've got that done, they're now back to starting to look how to accept forgiveness applications. So I think it's just, I think the lenders are, a little maybe overwhelmed.
Yes, I think that they are, because they're getting this crunch on both sides. A lot of borrowers said, no, I want to do my forgiveness first, and then I want to go do my PPP. And so you get into that kind of tug of war, and it all happens at the same time. But there is no overriding systematic issue with this. If you qualify, you will be forgiven. So a general question I've been asked, which I find interesting, is should I apply for PPP2? Well, if you qualify, yes. It's kind of, why not? And well, I don't know if I'm going to need it. Well, I would say to that, if you don't know that you're going to need it, then it could be likely that you're going to need it. I think the question, I'm not now saying this from a legal perspective or anything, I'm saying it from a business perspective as a business owner. If I think I'm going to need the money, then I'm probably going to need the money. The question is, am I sure I'm not going to need it? If I'm sure I'm not going to need it, then I should not take the PPP2. But if there is a decent chance, a more than minuscule chance, I would say yes. Better safe than sorry. If it turns out I absolutely didn't need it, shouldn't have taken it, give the money back. I didn't receive forgiveness yet. Should I be afraid of PPP2? touched on that a little bit, and the answer is no, no, no. There is a holdup, as Claire said, and there is a holdup in the apparatus for the forgiveness, not a systematic, but the processing. The forgiveness will happen. Remember, the timeline on forgiveness is the bank has 60 days to take it and give it to SBA. And SBA has 30 days to give their answer. And there's no indication that there are any problems whatsoever. If you qualify, you have a ducks in the order, you send in the material, and everything is fine. And with 24 weeks forgiveness period, I really haven't heard of anybody who did not qualify for forgiveness from PPP-1. When is the deadline for the forgiveness application? And here people are learning more, and that can be sometimes a little bit dangerous. It's a good thing, sometimes a little bit dangerous, because some people have heard that there is no deadline for forgiveness application. Well, that is true to some extent. And because as long as you do the application before you pay it in full, you can do it. But what happens after 10 months after the covered period ends, which is 24 weeks after you get the funding, you have 10 months before they start sending you a bill. And once they start sending you a bill, you have to pay it until you get forgiven. And then you're in that whole thing because you don't want to be in default. So you have 10 months before you start getting bills after the 24 weeks. Here again, I'm going to say that every time I talk is make sure you apply to forgiveness. Apply or you won't be forgiven.
There's a question, Chris. If I never applied for a loan under the PPP, under the first PPP, and would like to apply now, do I apply for the first loan or the second loan, or does it make a difference? How do I get started?
If you didn't do the first, you have to do the first, and it's the same deadline. It is March 31st, and you go and apply for PPP-1. So right now, both PPP-1 and PPP-2 are open. PPP-2 really applies only to the ones that have PPP-1, but it really doesn't matter. For 99% of the people, it doesn't really matter. It's the same type of thing. Not much difference on it.
And then I think the how to get started is it's through the lender, right? So I would go typically to your primary bank, and if they're not accepting the applications, then you have to start researching other alternatives.
Yes, I've seen 3 different lenders, and they all look kind of the same with it. You go in, going to look for the PPP-2 loan, and it actually asks you, what are you asking for? Is it PPP-1 loan or PPP-2 loan? And you click the box for the one, and it takes you to the appropriate forms to deal with once you're there. And it is through the lender. It's not through SBA. You go through the lender. So then I've also been asked quite a bit, are there forms to fill out for the forgiveness? There are forms. There are 3 different forms, one for the regular, one an easy one where you don't have to do a huge 30 pages something, and then the easy one, which is 11 pages or something. Then there is the 3508S, which is for 150,000. If you have a loan for under 150,000, it's a 1-page form. It looks like this, and that's it. Do you have to actually do the calculations? You're supposed to, but you don't have to actually do any of them and tell them any of them. But SBA could come back and ask you How likely? Probably not very likely on an under $150,000 loan, as something very specific happens. So very, very unlikely. It's a one-page thing if you have less than 150,000. And that form is out there now. However, my point here is that, are there forms to fill out? Yes and no. What has happened in every case I've seen, every case I've heard of, is that the banks doing their IT, their programming of their website, make their version of each respective form. And then you actually go through the process with the bank of filling in the questions that they ask that is the same on the form. So typically you actually don't fill out the form, you don't upload the form. What you do, you fill out the boxes on the portal of the bank, and then you upload the documents to get the forgiveness.
And what's interesting is that, like, for example, with my bank, they didn't even want documents. They said, hold on to the documents, keep them for your records, but you don't have to upload anything. Just put the information here. If we ever want the backup, we'll ask for it.
Yes, that is what you have if you borrow less than 150,000. They don't want to look at it. They don't want it. And the SBA has waived the bank's responsibilities for those evidence as long as the borrower clicks the box saying that they have the evidence. So the bank has no liabilities for that. They don't want to deal with it. They just want to go on, get it forgiven, and go on to the next thing. Here, good old standby question. Does the EIDL grant reduce the forgiveness amount? No, it does not. It was that in the beginning for a long time. It was that the EIDL grant portion of EIDL would reduce the forgiveness. It doesn't affect the forgiveness. So you have the grant and your whole PPP is forgiven. Do I pay taxes on any of the PPP funds? No, there are no taxes. And all the underlying expenses you use to get the forgiveness are also tax deductible. So there is no tax effect on the PPP funds. And there was a thing with a base for pass-through partnerships, etc. But by now that should not be an issue. And the CPA, typically if you're in that situation, the CPA you have should be well aware of those issues. If it comes up, ask your CPA to actually look into the issue and make sure that they know what they're doing. There should be no tax effect. So, and then that also goes to the issue on the books themselves, on your balance sheet. What does the bookkeeper do with those PPP funds? Once you're sure that you're forgiven, then that moves from a loan to either to reduce expenses or directly to equity. And when that happens, make sure that if you do your taxes yourself, if you go to TurboTax, etc., you do your taxes online, make sure that you don't by mistake. I don't know how they're going to do it. We have not done ours yet, and don't do them through TurboTax. So I don't know what they're going to ask and how they're going to do it. But make sure that you don't end up reducing your expenses, increasing your profit, and end up inadvertently paying taxes on it. Make sure that you go through that process and you understand what you're doing, so you don't get an extra and tax on an extra $7,500, $200,000, whatever it is.
There's a question here. So for 2020, is there anything to report with regard on your taxes with regard to the PPP, or is it just ignored for 2020?
For 2020, if you got your forgiveness, then your bookkeeper is going to go through and put it where it usually is. But no, when you take it from your books to the taxes, then that should not be reported. So if you had $100,000 that goes into then on your books, not the tax book, but your books, reduce the labor expense by $100,000, then in your taxes, that shouldn't happen. So make sure.
And I think, and if it wasn't forgiven in 2020, you would just record it as a liability because it's not yet forgiven. Is that correct? So if it was received in 2020 but not yet forgiven, it's just recorded as a liability, and that's not relevant to taxes either.
Yes.
Okay.
And the big thing is to make sure that you don't inadvertently take it off your expenses and end up paying taxes on it. How you end up treating the forgiveness from a tax perspective is not that important anymore, since it's not supposed to be taxable. There's no timing issues anymore and those kind of things that you have to deal with. Just make sure that you don't forget about it, especially if you file an extension and you end up dealing with this in August, you forget about this whole thing, and then you can't understand why my taxes looking so high. Remember the PPP, if that reduced your expenses. When is the deadline for PPP 2 and 1 application? 3/31/21. And usually say, don't wait if you can do it. I really don't think we're going to run out of money, but why wait? There is no reason anymore not to. There are no issues. So just go ahead and do it. Get the information you need on the 25% reduction. So am I eligible for second bite if my net income didn't go down? And I keep getting this question, and the answer is has nothing to do with the net income. It is your receipt or revenues in any quarter in 2020 compared to 2021, if it went down by 25% or more, then you are eligible. And on that issue, so my revenues for the second quarter of 2020 shows that I had revenues of, pick the number, $500,000. And the previous year, it was $400,000. Well, that's, 500, previous years were $600,000. That's not enough of a reduction. So, but I had $75,000 of currently uncollected receivables. Well, from that period of time, that was on the books at that time, from that period of time, then you could actually write those 75,000 off in that second quarter and then thereby qualify. So you don't have to count uncollectibles, refunds, returns in those revenue numbers. So if you ended up making big returns in the second quarter and you didn't actually account for it until the third quarter, which happens very, very often in especially small companies, bookkeeping type thing, you take it, you do the easier thing, it becomes as it comes in and you don't go back and adjust the those kind of things. A few people do, but in this case, you may want to do that if you're on the border. If I borrow less than 150K, do I need to substantiate anything for PPP 2? Yes, you have to substantiate the decline in the revenues, the 25%. Shouldn't be that difficult to do. Use your financials. If you're on a cash basis, look at your receipts for your business and just count them up, compare one to the other. Most people nowadays have their bank accounts tied to their QuickBooks. So just run the reports, see what they say, and you may be there. we talked the last time a lot about the necessity for the PPP funds. I'm not going to get into details now. What I'm going to say is that conceptually, in my opinion, conceptually, philosophically, is that if you think that you need the money, if you think that you could be in a trouble if you don't get this money, then you need the money. And I would make, well, however I determine that, for a little bit big operations, I would do a forecast that shows that if I decrease my revenues by 15%, I could be in trouble. Then I would just take that, write myself a memo, and have that in place should somebody look for it. SBA is not going to actually audit anybody who borrows less than $2 million in PPP 1 and 2. But they could come back and ask, somebody could come back and ask, if you're down in less than $1 million, especially if you're down to 150, less than 150, 200,000, I don't think ever anybody's going to ask, but I would still write myself a memo on it. And in that vein, you don't want to be one of those people who end up in a local paper and saying that Peter, Paul, and Mary Enterprise got $300,000 PPP loans and they bought the Lamborghini. You don't want to be that guy. So don't do stupid. And if you're going to make extraordinary distributions, wait until after that PPP is forgiven. That would be my advice.
Along those lines, Chris, as well, what about for people who possibly received grants or distributions from other government entities? Like, for example, in Monmouth County, we had that Monmouth Cares did the grant. So if you took that money that you were rewarded from the county and it was towards paying rent or something like that, and then you get the PPP loan, you can't apply the PPP loan to what you applied the grant to? That's a question, not a statement. Would that be?
That is correct, I think. Most of the times what I've seen is that you can't apply grants to the same thing. Can you, if you get a grant saying that this is to help cover your payroll, I haven't seen anything that would say that PPP, that payroll couldn't be justified for forgiveness in PPP. I have not seen that.
Okay. And then we have a question from Elizabeth that says, I have a client with a first round of PPP loan for $12,000 who's been audited. I'm not sure if that question, I think that's more of a statement, but that's interesting.
First round of PPP that of 12,000 has been audited, and could be a number of things, and it's a little bit unusual, but it could be completely random thing, and it could also be that the lender got some kind of a feeling and poked the SBA, or an employee or somebody else poked. I think most likely is probably a completely random event that they have decided to lose. Somebody's going to lose the lottery and be audited, which goes back to what we keep saying. You apply for this forgiveness, make sure that you actually have access to the records behind it. Yes, and the person is saying that they were told it was random. The banker told them, the bank, 3 out of 5,000 loan audited. Yeah, that makes sense. So somebody's going to be audited. So thanks for that, Elizabeth. Good info to know. So it does happen. Make sure that you have access to your information should it happen. What payroll do I need for PPP2? 99 out of 100 will use the same 2019 payroll as they use for PPP1. Most bankers make it very easy. They just say, are you going to use the same? If the answer is yes, great. We have everything we need. You just need to certify that you need it, and then they go on. If you qualify from a revenue perspective, but your 2020 payroll is higher enough to make a difference, then by all means go through the same things that you did for PPP1, use the 2020 payroll or any 12-month period that would kick up the amount for you. And then you have the payroll reports and 941 payroll tax reports that you have to use. In one of the operations I'm involved in, we actually did that. And I think I might have shared the thought process with you the last time, because we went through, we looked at the certification process, and actually we were eligible for a very large amount. And we said, we really, with good conscience, cannot certify that, but we said we can actually, to be good conscience, certify half of the amount. So we used 2020 payroll and applied for a lower amount. Can I use a car as a payroll cost? Non-cash payroll expenses are not eligible, no. It has to be cash items for payroll or benefits, health insurance, those kind of things that we talked about. We did that the last time. I don't think we need to get into more of the finer aspects of the second bite PPP. Anybody has their specific questions? Let's then answer those. Let me see if we have anything here. We're going to send this out. So anybody has questions, how do you define payroll for S and C Corp, those kind of things, you can just look here.
And as usual, it's also going to be on our YouTube channel as well.
Yep. And if you know anybody who was in the categories of live venues, theatrical producers, performing arts, those kind of things, there are shadow venue grants out there that they should look up and look for, and they may be eligible for those. A little bit different than the PPP, but it could be very important for those kind of operators. Could be more money than PPP too. That is all for today, and you're not interested in my outlook.
Not interested in your emails? So what I just adding to, or not adding to that, but thanks, Chris. And just one thing to mention to everyone on the call. So we're going to be doing this bi-weekly for the next, I think we have a couple more scheduled. And if the PPP continues or changes continue, we'll extend this series of webinars. We also have a series of webinars coming up in the near future as well, specifically geared towards the restaurant and hospitality industries. Details of those are on our website at monmouth.score.org. So check those out. If you have people who are in the restaurant business or the hospitality business, it's talking about how you may possibly be able to get funding for your restaurants and how you may want to apply the use of some of that funding from a practical standpoint. We all know that local restaurants and businesses have been really impacted. So this is a webinar series that Chris is going to be running with another company. Chris, what's the name of the company?
Bela
Santorum.
Bela Santorum.
So I would just ask anybody on this, if you have friends or colleagues or people you know in the restaurant business, share that with them. If you're in the restaurant business as well, same thing, and please join it because I think it'll be very helpful, specifically focused. Sorry, my light fell off my computer. Specifically focused to the restaurant world. Also, we have a number of webinars scheduled. We have webinars now scheduled through middle of June at this point. They're bi-weekly. We didn't want to overwhelm people with webinars, but if you check again on our website, monmouth.score.org, you can see we have a number of different topics coming up. So share with your friends and share with other colleagues that you may have. That's really my spiel for SCORE. I don't have much else to add. Chris, you have anything to add?
No, I think that if you've had any questions, you have friends who have questions, those can feel free to flip us an email either to me or to Monmouth Score, and we'll do our best to answer those in a timely fashion.
Great. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and
good luck with the business out there, everybody.
Yes, good luck. All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.